Welcome to Better Odds Sports Betting. Here's our hosts, Kev O'Neill and Kyle Hunter.
What's up, friends? Welcome back to Better Odds Sports Betting, brought to you by Betfred Sportsbook. Kyle can't make it today, but we have a wonderful guest, our very own Michael Fordham from the oddsbreakers.com and Fordham Betting. Michael, big weekend coming up. It's getting colder in some spots of the United States. How the heck you doing?
I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on. Obviously we got rivalry week in college football next week, but that does create some pretty good betting opportunities here in the week 12 slate. So I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, exactly. It's funny. I always do a look ahead spot, like article, but I missed a couple on there. It's like, oh yeah, Oregon State, Oregon. There's a bunch of them, and I think you have to be very careful if you're betting a favorite here or somebody that has a big look at in this situation. I guess a couple games are actually rivalries this week. If you want to talk about Oklahoma and Oklahoma State, so you have a couple of those sprinkled in a little bit early here, but next weekend's going to be massive. Thanksgiving week is probably my favorite football week of all time, Michael.
Absolutely. Thursday through Sunday is it doesn't stop.
Exactly. It doesn't stop. It starts with the Egg Bowl and just keeps rolling here with college. So I'm excited for that as well. But we have a massive slate coming up this weekend with some opportunity. Before we get into that, Michael, I got to give you some props for basketball side of things. Texas took care of business against Gonzaga. How I'm guessing you were there.
I was. Yep. It was a great game to be at. For those who don't know, we just opened our new arena, the Moody Center. We were in the Frank Irwin Center for about 40 years. It became very run down. It was honestly too big. Basketball is one of those sports where it's better to have a tight, compact arena. So that's kind of what we've done. So it was a great environment. And we were talking before that game was just kind of over before it started. I mean, we couldn't miss. I think we were 12 of 25 from three, which is typically not how we win. But yeah, it was a great environment. And I mean, we kind of just ran them out of the building.
Yeah, I know. I was real excited for some of the transfers coming into Texas too, and Hunter and a couple other. Yeah, he's actually from very close to where my parents live, Racine actually, where my dad lives, I should say. But it's interesting to see he went to Iowa State and transferred in. But if you're a Texas fan, you're probably frowning a little bit on the football thing. But
yeah, a little bit.
It started out so good. I mean, that's got to be a little disappointing, but you're not. There's a lot of people in the same boat as you, because you know what? There's only 4 teams that make the playoff anyway, Michael.
Absolutely.
So let's get started then and talk a little college football. You had a request for a game to talk about. It's in the SEC. It's a very interesting game. Arkansas is facing Ole Miss. And there's a lot of story to it based upon what happened the last couple weeks. Why don't you break this down for us and let me know your thoughts?
Yeah, so obviously we got Ole Miss coming off that gut-wrenching loss to Alabama last week. I don't really like this spot for them. You know, it's a tough spot to get yourself up off the mat. Now you're traveling to Fayetteville. I guess you might call it a slight look ahead to the Egg Bowl, given that it is coming on Thursday night. So you are going to be on a short week. Coming back home, I believe. But really, this starts and ends with KJ Jefferson. If you watched that Arkansas LSU game last week, he might be the most valuable player to any one team in college football. With him as Arkansas starting quarterback this year, that offense has averaged 35 points per game. Without him, they've averaged 17. And I think, like I said, if you watched that LSU game last week, you saw his absence and the impact it had on that game. He's been back at practice this week. I fully expect him to play, and that was enough for me to get on Arkansas at +2.5. The one glaring weakness to that team is their defense, and I could see Ole Miss having some success on the ground here. But when push comes to shove, this game's going to fall on the arm of Jackson Dart. I just haven't seen what I've wanted to from him this year. In SEC play, he's under 7.5 yards per attempt. I don't really think Ole Miss has the skill talent at the wide receiver position to be able to go toe-to-toe with Arkansas. I did like Ole Miss's defense earlier in the year, but they played a very weak schedule. And here over the last month or so, they have, kind of come back down to earth a little bit. So I do like this spot for Arkansas, and I equally dislike it for Ole Miss. So I did bet on Arkansas plus a 2.5.
I don't disagree at all with that. Ole Miss, as we kind of, I guess, thought and analyzed throughout the year, that they're a little suspect of a 8-2 record here. They've played so many easy teams, and what's so funny is, like, even when they had no losses and in one loss, they're never talked about being in the playoffs or any chance of that. And you saw that. I think this is a great spot for Arkansas too, kind of coming up here with the quarterback most likely coming back. And Arkansas has got a lot to play for because, they had a disappointing season in general, but they can still play for a good bowl game. They have 5 losses now. They have 5 wins. The next win puts them in bowl contention. Much better of a situation for them to do it at home rather than have to wait and go to a kind of dangerous Missouri next week. This is an all or nothing game for Arkansas. And I almost thought I'd like the over, but I liked how their defense stopped in last week to say hi finally, Michael. So
they had 7 sacks in that game. I mean, they totally dominated the line of scrimmage.
Absolutely, they did. Here's my thoughts. I think you can wait this out and possibly get that better number here. I think there's going to be a lot of people just infatuated with Lane Kiffin's offense and their record. People are just going to look at 8-2, and you might have a shot at getting it. Obviously, it's going to be a race to the sharper bettors and the bigger money, because once that 3 pops, it won't be there long. So do a little line watching. But to be honest with you, I think the 2.5 is fine too. It's a big spot, maybe even a little bit of a money line play, Michael.
One more thing that I wanted to bring up, and I didn't even really consider this in my handicap, but do you view Lane Kiffin, him being thrown around in the Auburn job, there's starting to be some speculation that he might not be back at Ole Miss. Do you view that as a distraction? I mean, I certainly don't think it could hurt.
It certainly doesn't hurt, but I don't believe the distraction. I think that the kids, the season's almost over. It's almost like at this point of the season, they're kind of just, I don't care what happens to me, like, type thing. If it was earlier in the season, it would be definitely a distraction. I think it's more noise than news, if you want to ask me. So I'm not buying it. But to be honest with you, just looking at what happened with Brian Kelly, any coach that's kind of peaked at any program can only go down from there. And it's probably a good move for them to leave anyway, especially if they can get the same recruits, Michael.
Right. Let's
move on to the next game. I picked this one. It's in the heart of Big 12 country. And I got to tell you, I've got a lot of Big 12 action coming this week, man. I think I'm a Big 12 dog hunter, let's just say.
Oh, yeah.
It's been working out for me. What can I tell you?
There's so much parity in the conference. It makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. But this is going to be probably a more under the radar game with Iowa State. And they are hosting Texas Tech. And it's an interesting game because, Iowa State and Matt Campbell, people expected a lot more of him. But at the same time, it's the defense kind of shows up. And I saw a tweet from Bill Connolly saying if they had just their offensive last year and the defense of this year, they'd be like a top 6, top 7 team or something like that. And I agree with that. It's almost funny, but at the same time, they're really shutting people up at home here. Texas Tech is normally a fast-paced team. So, the totals are usually a little bit higher, but they also have not been, I guess, the most efficient team. I'm trying to say. I think that Texas Tech has been faltering in the red zone, and they should be a lot more successful than they've showed. I also think that Iowa State has the type of defense, and throughout this whole year can probably stop them. I looked at the temperature to this game, Michael, and it's like in the teens. I think the very high you're going to get for this game is 20 degrees, and that's being optimistic. The wind's starting to pick up a little bit here. Looking at what Iowa State's done, I can't see how this game is going to sneak over unless there's going to be some pick sixes or some special teams touchdowns. The Clones, went to Oklahoma State, and their offense didn't show up, but they stopped them to 20 points. They held West Virginia at home to 14, even a strong Oklahoma team to 27. Kansas State only put up 10 points there, Baylor 31, but Ohio 10. If you look at it, they're only giving up 16.7 points per game. In the cold weather, it favors the defense because the defense is always running. It just hurts that much more to get popped by somebody. I like the under 47.5 this game, Michael.
Man, I don't hate that at all. The one thing I cannot stand about Texas Tech is they go for it so much on fourth down that, I mean, they just leave so many points on the field. I mean, if you watch them on a few separate occasions this year, like when they went to play Oklahoma State in Stillwater, they outgained Oklahoma State by, I think, 100 yards, and they lost by double digits just because they just leave so many points on the field with all these fourth downs they go for and then don't get. That also played a role in that TCU game. I mean, I believe they were up in the fourth quarter, and I think they went for it on their own 30. So I'm not a huge
There was some mistakes made in that game. There's some bad officiating as well, and I was on Texas Tech, unfortunately.
Oh no!
I bought it to 10. I bought it to 10, so I pushed, but
okay.
I had a William Hill contest play on it, and that didn't push. But I know what you're saying, but here's the situation. One team has 4 wins. Iowa State and Texas Tech has 5 wins. They both need a bowl. I think it's more desperation. When that happens, the defense shows up and they stop making those stupid gambles. A coach vying for bowl life better not be making these gambles here in this situation. God, the yards per play are terrible on offense here. 123rd in offensive rushing success rate for Iowa State, only 98th in passing success rate for Texas Tech, even though they're technically built to be a passing team, being the third in tempo in the whole league. So I just think points will be at a premium. I like under 47.5.
I totally agree. I've actually been on some Iowa State overs this year, and I can tell you it's not the right side to be on. So
it's not the right side to be on, that's for sure. Awesome. Let's move on to the final game then. And I believe this is going to be the best game on the West Coast. USC versus UCLA. And Michael, I got to admit, I've been excited for this game. And when I first looked at it, I thought I was going to bet UCLA. Now I don't have a bet. Maybe you can talk me on a certain side here.
I am on UCLA plus the 2.5.
Okay.
I know Caleb Williams has gotten a lot of notoriety and credit for USC's success this season, and rightfully so. He's been a really good player for Lincoln Riley, but they lost Travis Dye last week in that Colorado game. Their number 1 running back. He's been over 6 yards per carry. If you've watched college football these last few years, he was a great player at Oregon as well. I don't believe they're going to be able to replicate that loss. I mean, I know they got Austin Jones, who padded his numbers last week against a terrible Colorado defense. I think he had a big game against Fresno State, but I think it's a significant downgrade at that running back position. I think that's going to put more on Caleb Williams' shoulders, and this is just a big game. I love UCLA's offense with Zach Charbonnet. 7.5 yards per carry. He's been terrific. Dorian Thompson-Robinson doesn't have the same maybe explosiveness through the air that a guy like Caleb Williams does, but he is more efficient. And I just think it's a more balanced offense. I also just don't like the dynamics of this matchup for Lincoln Riley. They haven't played a ton of big games this year. I don't know. It's just, I guess that Utah game would qualify, but Chip Kelly's been building at UCLA for 5 years. He's got a 5th-year starting quarterback. I just kind of like the dynamics of this matchup for the Bruins, so I did take them as the short home dog.
I don't disagree with your handicap, and Dye is massively important to this team. And what a terrible place to get injured against Colorado.
I know, right?
It's almost like he shouldn't have been playing in the game. I was watching that game on Saturday night. That was the late night game, and we decided to have a bonfire and have a couple beers. And I'm like, well, I got to put on a football game, and I put it on, and it wasn't much to watch because they were just beating the crap out of them. But it was still kind of fun to watch the USC trounce down the field and everything. But I will say that this will be a 1-score game. And I want to bet a prop that it's decided under 7 points or something like that. I really believe it's going to be a kind of a shootout between these two teams. And if you look at the actual total, I believe it's quite high. I think it's 75. Let me bring it up here.
I saw 76, and I think it opened in the 80s. So they're expecting a high scoring game for sure.
Yeah, it's at 76 on DraftKings right now. And I'll share my screen here. So you can see that it's +2. Looks like some money's coming in on the UCLA side. My big issue is those Pac-12 refs are not really all that trustable sometimes either. And I think USC is the only shot of getting them into the playoffs. I think it would take a lot for USC to get into the playoffs. I have a 1-loss Tennessee above them getting into the playoffs. Obviously not our decision, but I think that an LSU possibly beating Georgia might get the nod over them. I think a 1-loss Michigan, being that they're playing Ohio State, might get ahead of them. I know I will say that Utah game they lost, I thought that they got kind of the bad end of the officiating spectrum that day, but a loss is a loss, and they don't have a top 25 win right now, Michael. And
Pac-12 is just so weak this year. There's so many bottom dwellers that, I mean, even in some of their tougher games like Washington State, even some of the middle of the pack of the Pac-12, I mean, there's just no way that they're going to be able to go up with the Oregons and the USCs.
For sure. And it would have been nice if UCLA wasn't looking ahead to this game and screwed up against an Arizona team that totally got beat bad by Mississippi State. Mississippi State was looked at better, and then they started losing, and Arizona has double-digit loss against Mississippi State. Then they beat UCLA. It's like if UCLA plays that tough game against USC, people are going to say that UCLA is not that good. So it's going to be tough for the Pac-12 to get in, especially now that Oregon lost. So I agree with that. No, this is going to be the game of the weekend. I think is this game. It's going to be fun to watch. I recommend watching this thing. It's going to be great. Moving on to the NFL, then we just take care of 2 games here. We're going to look at the night game for Sunday night, which has a line that's been dropping a little bit. We have Kansas City, and they are going to the LA Chargers. And this is now at +5, Michael. The total is 52. I don't know how much I know you're a big college guy. Do you bet much of the NFL?
I don't, but I do follow it, so I should be able to follow along here.
Cool. So my thoughts is obviously this was a line movement coming down from the 7, 6.5 down to the 5. And the line movement was just based upon the receivers practicing. Mike Williams is practicing now. Injury reports has been really moving the NFL market. I mean, massively. It's almost overblown. I would maybe venture to say even. It's the thing with the Chargers for me is that I don't want to go against a division rivalry where they always play each other tough. But B, this Chargers team is probably even worse than what they were last year. They have a ton of other injuries. They have Covington, the defensive tackle, on the injury report now. He's on injured reserve. Even though that Gerald Everett, their tight end that's been saving them the last couple of weeks, is questionable, he's got a groin injury that could be really messing him up. And how do you trust that Keenan Allen's actually going to play this game? I sure as hell don't trust it. I think that this is a great spot for Kansas City to say, hey, we should be the number 1 team coming in. We're the best team. We're better than Buffalo. I know we have that loss against them, but it would almost kind of be a statement game for them. Metrically, I actually have Kansas City winning by about 7 points anyway. So probably not a play for me, but we'll be watching it on Sunday. Any thoughts on it?
So these teams played, I believe, earlier in the year on Thursday night, if I'm not mistaken. I don't remember what the spread was in that game, but I do remember Justin Herbert led a late game garbage time drive for the backdoor cover. But when these teams played in Kansas City, it did seem like Kansas City kind of dictated the way that game was played. So I don't hate that look. Like I said, I'm not a huge NFL guy, but one of the main narratives I have heard is Chargers have been really beat up this year. So Kansas City is one of those teams that you certainly don't want to be beat up going against.
Yeah, absolutely. And Kansas City, even though they've had their share of injuries, I love the Tony pickup, man, on wide receiver. Hardman missed last game, but Kadarius Toney, he's got some massive speed, and he was great when he played for the Gators, man. I think that was an A+ move for Kansas City.
Those small, fast receivers are kind of the new wave. It used to be the big 6'4", 6'5", jump ball kind of receivers, but with the way offenses run now, those smaller, shifty, fast wide receivers are.
Well, Michael, you saw how the defensive market adjusted. Then tall cornerbacks became the premium coming out of college.
Right.
Looking at the guys like from Cincinnati, he just got drafted by the Jets. He's
Sauce
wonderful.
Gardner.
So yeah, Ahmad Sauce Gardner. He's a big guy, and all the big guys kind of started coming in, and then the narrative changes back to speed. It's kind of back and forth. It's funny how things adjust, but you're right. It's the speedy guy, and Tyreek Hill has led the charge for that. And then, but if you can get a tall, speedy guy like Jefferson, forget about it, man. That's a
both worlds.
Yeah, that sure is. So my number here is -7. I think that this is backdoorable for the Chargers, especially if Mike Williams plays. I think Mike Williams is their best player on that team, if you're not counting the quarterback. But I think that he's massive for it. And they have a good running back there too. But they played this game pretty close, so I'm going to stay away from it. Let's move on to the Monday game, and this is played in Mexico City here. We have the Arizona Cardinals against the San Francisco 49ers, and I believe this spread, and I'll bring it up right now, is still 8. Yep, this thing's been sitting at 8, Michael, and the total is 43.5. So my thoughts on why this is still at 8 is because we don't know who's quarterbacking. We don't know if it's going to be Kyler Murray, or we don't know if it's going to be Colt McCoy, your boy, Colt McCoy.
Literally my hero. I mean, I was like 9 years old when he was at Texas. It's crazy that he's still in the league. That was awesome to see that last week, though.
Yeah, he's still in the league because he's got a hell of a motor on him, and he's just got the kid's just a good kid. He's focused, and he doesn't have all the talent, but he overworks his talent to
absolutely
to be very serviceable. And I love kids like that. I think it's awesome. He's sure not as bad as Sam Ellinger, so we'll put that out there, but, at least so far. But I think that this line is going to go down to 7 if Kyler Murray's announced in, and I think it probably goes up to 10 if it's Colt McCoy. But to be honest with you, at the 8, I would rather have a healthy Colt McCoy. Now he was on the injury report with a knee contusion. I think he's fine. He finished the game last game. I'm going to throw that out. But I would rather have a healthy Colt McCoy than an injured Kyler Murray all day, because if Kyler Murray's not running, he's short. He cannot make the big passes, it seems, unless he's scrambling. I don't like a Kyler Murray that can't scramble. I personally would lean, if this thing gets into the double digits, at least for the Cardinals here. Especially that's such a crazy venue. It's like you got to go dog in that. What's your thoughts?
So, how do you feel about San Fran's secondary? Like, do they are they good in those one-on-one matchups?
No. That's their weakness is their secondary, because they lost so many players. They were hoping Verrett was going to come back, and Verrett, right when he was coming back, tore his Achilles in practice. San Fran is just so injured, and I'll even pull up the injury report so anybody watching can see this thing. It looks like, Jason Verrett on injury reserve. They lost Emmanuel Mosley, which was their other really good guy, back in late October here. So, torn ACL. Now Ward is going to play, which is good, but they got some really just lower class second stringer type corners in. The good news is, they get a pass rush, but if the Niners are not getting a pass rush for whatever reason, the time would kill them. And you saw that happen when Kansas City went to San Fran, only a 1-point favorite, and blew the doors out of the San Francisco 49ers. The problem with the Cardinals, they can't stop the run. So the Niners can control the clock and do this. The Niners are a great teaser leg Michael, in my opinion. And I already paired them with the Raiders, believe it or not. I brought them to plus 8.5, and I brought this Niners down to -2. But there's a couple other decent teaser legs like the Vikings at 1.5 to 7.5 that you could pair with them as well, Michael.
Yeah, the one thing I'll say about these air raid offenses, they're obviously very popular. I think a lot of people think Cliff Kingsbury is this offensive wizard, but we kind of talked about it with Texas Tech, though. Just because you throw the ball a lot doesn't mean you're great at it. If Colt McCoy is in there, obviously not a huge threat in the vertical passing game. It's going to be a lot of short, quick passes. You mentioned San Francisco's pass rush. I actually do like the way that the air raid offense goes against that. There's just not as much time to get home. Maybe an under would be a good look, especially with you talking about San Francisco controlling the clock. But with Arizona's trouble stopping the run, maybe that they're just able to, get into the upper 20s. So I don't have a look on this game, but, it should be a good one on Monday night.
Yeah, in Mexico City, I remember the field was really bad coming apart. The one I think was the last game there, the game before. So you have to just wonder what's going to happen there. I think there's just a lot of variance added to this game being that it's played. It's also a higher elevation out there as well. So that's throw that in your handicap as well. If Arizona's defense is gassed, this could be like a 20-3 game. You don't know what's going to happen. So I think the teaser is probably the safest move on here. That brings us to our most likely dog at plus 3.5 or larger to win outright. Now, it doesn't have to be most likely, just one that you think there's some value on. I mean, there is some tempting dogs, Michael, this week. Yeah, I mean, you got Kansas, you got Oklahoma State. I got one myself that's bigger. I'm going to see what you got first.
I'm going to let you start. You already kind of teased it. I want to go ahead and hear it.
Wonderful. I'm going to go crazy and go with a team I've probably never bet the dog on before, and that's Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt is in a situation where they can make a bowl game for the first time in teen years. I don't even remember the last time this team made a bowl, but you know what? They got some momentum now. They beat Kentucky. They went to Kentucky and did it. They have bowling on their sights, and they are playing a very vulnerable Florida team that's probably already thinking towards next year. Florida has not been lighting it up. They rank 104th in defensive success rate here, 89th against the pass, 104th against the rush. This team gets no push whatsoever. Now, I know Vanderbilt has not been the greatest team, but they have been slowly improving over the last few weeks, and they've been actually holding their own against some of these teams. There's a few one-score games in here as well. So I'm liking Vandy here, and I think that, just Florida and all their flaws on defense, all you got to do is stop Richardson. That's what you got to do, and if you do that, you have a path to victory. When Florida played South Florida, they should have lost that game, Michael.
Absolutely.
I love the plus 470 you're going to get here. I think there's value. So what are your thoughts?
I like that a lot. I do have a play on this game. I played the over. I agree with you. I think Vanderbilt is going to be able to run the football. They were starting AJ Swan for a while, who's more of I think he's a true freshman, but he's more of a high pedigree thrower. But they got a guy in Mike Wright that they use in the run game at the quarterback position. Their offense just works better with him in the game. And I totally agree. I'm not sold on Florida's defense. I know they held South Carolina to 6 last week, but I think that has a lot more to say about South Carolina.
Yeah.
I'll disagree with you in the sense that I really don't like Vanderbilt's defense because they have given up 50 or more on 3 separate occasions in SEC play. And I do think Florida's physical up front, and they should be able to run the football. I like what they have in that running back room. So I did play the over in this. But if I had to pick a side, I would absolutely take those points with Vanderbilt. I do think this would probably be a good time to sell high on Florida.
It is. And I will tell you one thing, those 3 games that you mentioned, Alabama, Georgia, and Ole Miss. So it's not something
that's true.
Completely shake your head against here. I think that, being at home, I also like the fact that Florida is already going bowling. They have a look ahead game to Florida State coming up here. So this money line is sticking out. I think this is money line week I don't even have a problem if people take little round robins. You know, what you do in a round robin is you take like 5 money line dogs, or anybody in the money line. Really, you can throw a favorite in if you really like them, and then it'll create little 2-game parlays for you, and that's up to 10 bets. So you throw like a quarter of a unit or a half a unit on a 5 team round robin. It comes up to 10 small parlay bets, and I think you can really butter your bread. You hit 3 of those, you know, because you don't know if you play a 5-game parlay, one could bust it. But if you hit 3 or 4 of a 5 and you're doing round robin, you're great.
Credit.
And if you hit all 5 on your round robin bet, it pays about the same as your 5-game parlay would have anyway.
Right.
So it's stupid to not do round robins, in my opinion. I think the round robin is perfect.
The one thing I'll say about Vanderbilt too, I mean, they obviously beat Kentucky last week, and that wasn't a fluke at all. I mean, they outgained Kentucky by I think like 130 yards. They ran the ball for 261 yards on Kentucky. I mean, that was not a fluke. I'd say if anything, they probably should have scored more. So I do like that look a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And you know, they have a couple wins. They did beat Northern Illinois. Obviously, the Elon one is not something you're going to count. First weekend they blew away Hawaii, and they were kind of in that game. Ole Miss did beat them 52-28, but they did put up 28 points. Now the game at Missouri was very close, 14-17. I was very impressed by what they did there. I expected better out of the South Carolina game, but you're right, the Kentucky thing. This team's motivated, so why not give it a shot? Do you have one for us, Michael?
Yeah, I have a few that I wouldn't say I feel better about one. I think you mentioned it, Oklahoma State at Oklahoma. I'm just of the opinion that we're going to see Oklahoma State at their best in this game. I think Spencer Sanders will be back. You know, I've been very critical of that offense this year. They haven't run the ball well. I think Sanders is kind of had a down year from his standards, but playing against Oklahoma, it's a pretty good opponent to get your offense right against. I just don't view them as a threat and really up front stopping the run. And that secondary has been beaten pretty often in Big 12 play. So I don't think Oklahoma State is a bad look. How about Arizona coming off that win at UCLA? I'm not the biggest Washington State guy, and they are. I think you talked about this with Florida. They just got to 6 wins last week. They got Washington coming up. I don't know what they call that rivalry. Is it the Apple Cup?
No, the Apple Cup is Washington. It is it's something Valley Cup. Hold on, I'll Google it while you're looking.
Yeah, but I really like Arizona's offense a lot. I mean, I think Jaden DeLora has kind of come into his own. This is actually, and I didn't even think about this. You know, he was the quarterback at Washington State last year, transfers over to Arizona, so gets to go up against his old team. I definitely think Arizona has the offensive advantage. It's just a matter of can they get stops. I like the way that Washington State has started to run the ball and kind of moved away from being just a pass-only offense. You know, I'm still not that high on Arizona's defense, so I didn't play it, but do think Arizona is probably worth a sprinkle as well.
Yeah, for sure. Arizona is great, and I believe that DeLora played for Washington State, their quarterback. So throw that in the mix right there, right? That's a massive motivational spot for him to beat his old team. So
absolutely.
The +4 looks great, and I love the money line play on it. You're going to get +160, +165, looking at the correct areas.
There's one other one I was going to bring up, and you know, I know this obviously going to hit close to home for you, but Wisconsin playing at Nebraska. Do we know if Casey Thompson's going to play?
He's going to play.
He's going to play, and that line's still double digits.
I believe so. Okay. It's one of those situations. Nebraska, and I had Tony George on earlier this week talking about it. He's a Nebraska guy. It's one of those situations. If Nebraska can just kind of hold their own a little bit in the trenches, that's where they got beat up. So this spread went from 13-10 with the Casey Thompson. My number would be about 8 if Casey Thompson's playing, to be honest with you. I don't trust Nebraska completely against the run, especially. And it's just, it would have been way better for them if Wisconsin could have somehow beat Iowa last week, but it's not. Wisconsin, I definitely give the coaching nod to with Jim Leonard. So it's one of those situations where I think it's a lot of variance here. I think the +300 is not a terrible look.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to bet on Nebraska this time of the year. 7 losses. They really got just pride to play for. But I did think that was interesting. And, you know, especially Thompson is playing, maybe worth a look, but, you know, like you said, you know, Wisconsin should be able to run the ball at will. So probably would need a pretty good game from Thompson.
Yeah, that's for sure. So you'll take Arizona, and I'll go with Vanderbilt. So we'll see what happens here. Last week we did hit on both of ours, which was really nice. They were both over plus 200, so that was wonderful. Tony had he had the Colts last week. He took the NFL one, and I took West Virginia against Oklahoma last week.
I was maybe going to bring that one up too. They play at home again this week, a similar type spot against Kansas State. That might not be a horrible one either.
Yeah, that could very much happen as well.
I think it's the same number too as that Oklahoma game last week.
Probably so. And then Kansas State looked great against Baylor, and so they're in the kind of the letdown spot. It's a really tricky spot to go play in West Virginia like that. It's very high up in the mountains, and it's
absolutely
just very strange. Awesome job, Michael. Where could our viewers and listeners get your great information and plays?
Find me over at theoddsbreakers.com. Writing a ton of free play articles over there. As you see on the screen, follow me on Twitter at Fordham Betting. I'm active there every day. Post all my stuff there. Make sure you're checked into theoddsbreakers.com, number one source for sharp sports betting information. I mean, Kiev does a great job. I think he mentioned this earlier in the show. He writes some really valuable articles about, letdown spots, look ahead spots. That's stuff that I certainly look at, and I think you should too. So head over to theoddsbreakers.com.
Awesome. Thank you, Michael. Very appreciate you plugging my articles. I do spend a lot of time on it, so I really appreciate it. And it's I try to share as much information for people out there just so they can read it. People don't have to become premium members. They can just go there and just digest what we're there to talk about. We have articles on the info spot about just the numbers about sports betting. We have a sports betting from Michael Newbert. He actually just put out an article on sports betting terms that people would. When I first started sports betting, I didn't know what laying the points meant. And I'm serious. Back in like the early 2000s, I didn't. It's just all these little terms for people, and a great way just to get information and kind of get with it. And there's functions on how to middle and how to get your expected value out of each bet, the highest that you can possibly get. So make sure you check us out at theoddsbreakers.com. Everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy all the games. Remember your ABCs. Always be capping. See you guys later.
Thank you for watching Better Odds Sports Betting.